Nobody Rides the Unicorn by Adrian Mitchell. In the faraway land of Jeopardy, there was once a king who was full of fear. He was afraid of everybody in the world. He was sure they were plotting to put poison in his wine or in his food. So the king called the most cunning man in Jeopardy, who was called Dr. Slythe. "There is only one sure way to avoid being poisoned," said Dr. Slythe. "You must drink from a goblet made from a unicorn's horn. You must eat with a knife, fork and spoon, all made from a unicorn's horn." "But how can I catch a unicorn?" asked the king. "Such a beast is too fierce and fast for my hounds." Dr. Slythe whispered in his ear, "The unicorn can only be trapped by a quiet young girl with a gentle voice." "So find me that girl," bellowed the king. Dr. Slythe sent for Zoe, the beggar girl. She was the quietest, gentlest girl in all of Jeopardy, and nobody's child. Zoe was brought before the king. Dr. Slythe told her, "We will take you into the deep forest, and you will sit alone, singing sweetly and softly. After a while, perhaps a unicorn will appear and come and lay his head in your lap." Zoe was very excited and scared, but she wanted to see the unicorn. So she went with the doctor and the king into the deep forest and sat alone and waited under a silver birch tree, and she sang very sweetly and softly this song, which she had learned to sing in her dreams. "His coat is like snowflakes woven with silk. When he goes galloping, he flows like milk. His life is all gentle and his heart is bold. His single horn is magical, barley, sugar, gold. Nobody rides the unicorn as he grazes under a secret sun. His understanding is so great that he forgives us, every one. Nobody rides the unicorn. His mind is peaceful as the grass. He is the loveliest one of all, and he lives beyond the waterfall." Zoe looked down at the flowers round her feet while she sang, and when she looked up, there was the unicorn. His dark golden eyes gazed into her eyes. He snuffled and stamped his hooves on the earth. Then he lay down and put his head in her lap. She said, good unicorn," and tickled him under the chin. His breathing was warm and musical, and soon his dark golden eyes closed in sleep. Suddenly the air was torn by trumpets. Out of the forest ran 100 huntsmen. There was a terrible struggle, and the unicorn was wounded 7 times by spears and hounds. But he fought on until Dr. Slythe crept up behind him and threw a magical golden bridle round his neck. And then the unicorn stood still and allowed himself to be led out of the forest and down the road by the river, and through the streets of the city and into the gardens of the royal palace. And there the unicorn was pushed into a paddock surrounded by a strong fence, and the unicorn was chained to a tree. Now Zoe was very angry, for she had been used to trick the unicorn, and now they had made it a prisoner, and she knew that was wrong because unicorns can only live in freedom. When she overheard the king and doctor planning to kill the unicorn and make a goblet and knives and forks and spoons out of his beautiful horn, Zoe was angry enough to burst. But Zoe was clever, so she didn't burst. She hid her anger, and in the middle of the night she crept into the gardens of the royal palace and cleaned the wounds of the unicorn and set him free. The unicorn lowered his head once to her and gazed into her eyes. Then he neighed once and galloped off down the streets of the sleeping city, along the river and into the depths of the forest. When the king knew the unicorn had escaped and Zoe had set him free, he shouted at her, "I ought to chop your head off. What do you say to that?" Zoe was the quietest girl in Jeopardy, so she said nothing at all. "You dare to be silent when I ask you a question," screamed the king. Very well, you shall have silence. I order that from this day on, no one in jeopardy shall speak to this little nobody. Zoe was in disgrace and she was unhappy. She missed the unicorn terribly, but where could she find him? Then she remembered those lines from her dream song. He is the loveliest one of all, and he lives behind the waterfall. Zoe left the city and followed the road beside the river. A full moon changed the river to silver. She followed it shining as it wound its way through the forest towards the bright mountains. Suddenly she was face to face with the waterfall. It was huge and powerful, like a giant of water. Zoe started to climb the waterfall. It was strong and icy, and the cold hurt her hands so much that she cried as she climbed, and the waterfall washed her tears away. She missed her footing and found herself falling in through the waterfall and into a cave. There might have been snakes there, might have been bears, but Zoe thought of the unicorn only, as she scrambled through the cave towards a speck of light, which became bigger and bigger till she came out at the other side. She looked down into the secret valley of the unicorns. There she saw the unicorns dancing together slowly in the moonlight. Zoe sat down to watch them. She was so happy she began to sing. Her unicorn turned away from the dancing and trotted over to Zoe. His dark golden eyes gazed into her eyes. He snuffled and stamped his hooves on the earth. Then he lay down and put his head in her lap. She said, good unicorn," and tickled him under the chin and sang her dream song sweetly and softly. At the end of Zoe's song, the unicorn's dark golden eyes spoke to her, saying, "Tell me, my kind friend, who are you?" Zoe said, "Me? I'm nobody." "Climb on my back, kind nobody," said the unicorn with his eyes. "For nobody rides the unicorn." The end.